Today, I'm going to share with you 3 hacks to crush poker quickly so that you can move up in stakes, because when you move up in stakes, you have the potential to make way more money from poker. For example, if you normally play 1-2 no limit hold'em and you make $20 per hour, a nice solid 10 big blind per hour win rate. If you move up to 2-5, you may be able to win $40 per hour or $50 per hour. And would you rather make $40 or $50 per hour or 20? Most people would say 40 or 50. Now, you will have more risk. The game may be a little bit tougher, but by moving up, you can double or 2.5x your income. And then from there, you can make a lot more money. And then from there, you can move up again to 5-10, or maybe you can make $80 or $100 per hour, and then you're really cooking. To win at poker, you have to do 3 things. These are 3 hacks, 3 concepts, 3 things you must fully understand if you want to succeed at the game of poker. Number 1, you have to find a game you can beat. Number 2, you have to play that game you can beat a lot. And number 3, you must keep a proper bankroll. While it's nice to move up, you don't want to move up to the point you move up so fast that you're not adequately bankrolled, and then you go on a big downswing and then you're out of action. If you don't play, you don't win, and having no money is a really easy way to not be able to play. So, first things first, you have to find a game you can beat. How do you find a game you can beat? Well, you have to have an advantage over your opponents. You have to make better decisions at the poker table than they do. So, how do you get this edge? You can do 2 things. The first is to get really good at poker. How do you get really good at poker? You study a lot. If you all didn't know, I have a poker training site, pokercoaching.com. Check it out. It has everything you need to get up to speed to crush your opponents. The great thing about studying is that you can study as much as you want in your spare time, which is amazing. You have a lot of potential to be excellent at poker if you apply yourself. And fortunately for you, a lot of your opponents don't want to apply themselves a lot. A lot of poker players at this point study a little bit, but they don't study a ton. And if you study a ton and your opponents don't, you'll probably have an edge over them. Alternatively, you can make a point to play against really bad players, which means you have to game select well. In cash games, say you go to your casino and you want to play 1-2 no limit hold'em. You're going to get seated at a table that you probably do not pick, but you are allowed to get on a table change list where you can go to other tables if a seat opens. And you want to make a point to figure out which table is the softest. Usually this will be the table where it looks like they're having a party. Or maybe you know some players are particularly bad and you want to try to move to play with them. You can ask the floor person to be put on this list, and when a seat opens at that table that you want to go to, get up and go to it. If you find that you go to the live casino and you sit at the same table all day, every time, wherever they put you, you're torching a lot of money. Now, if a seat opens at a game you do not want to move to, just tell the floor person, no thank you, I'd like a seat at the table you want to be seated at, and they will accommodate you. That's very, very important. In tournaments, you don't get to select your seat or your table, but you do get to select if you play the tournament to begin with. One time I flew across the country to play a $10,000 buy-in tournament that I knew would have about 1,000 people. It'd be a great game. The day before it, they had a $5,000 tournament that I thought would be a good game too. But I showed up and there were only 60 players in the tournament and 57 of them were world class. And the other 3 were not all that bad. So I, as a good poker player, recognize I have almost no edge in this game. Even if I had an edge in that $5,000 game, I may make $250 over the course of a 6-hour session on average. Sometimes I'd win, sometimes I'd lose, but on average, I wouldn't make all that much money. So I didn't play. I was either going to take the day off or go check out the cash games. I went and I took a look at the 25-50 game downstairs, and it was the softest thing I've ever seen. I didn't know any of the players. They were having a party. It was a wonderful time. I made a bunch of money sitting in that game, and it was definitely the right decision because those players were way worse than the players in the tournament. Now, to really ramp up how quick you move up in stakes, you want to get really good at poker, and you want to make a point to play against really bad players. If you have a huge edge over your opponents, well, your win rate's going to be through the roof. And when your win rate's through the roof, if you're playing 1-2 no limit hold'em, you may go from winning $20 an hour in a normal game to something like $50 per hour, or maybe even more if you're playing against especially awful opponents. And if you're making $50 an hour, you'll be able to move up somewhat quickly, quite quickly. And that's super duper valuable. The second thing you have to do is you have to play that game you can beat a lot. If you do not play, you do not win. And I recommend you play as much volume as you possibly can when you are in the bankroll building phase of your poker career. I used to play 5-10 no limit hold'em and 10-20 no limit hold'em at Bellagio pretty much every day. You may say, why 5-10 and 10-20? Well, I'd play the game that I thought was by far the softest. I would often try to play 10-20, but if that game was on the tougher side, I would play 5-10, where I expected to be way better than my opponents. And then I would play about 12 hours almost every day. Something like 70 or 80 hours per week. You may say, that sounds crazy. You didn't have a life. Well, I did not have much of a life besides sitting at the poker table because I, at that point in my life, cared about turning my little bit of money into a lot of money. And I did. It turns out, if you're putting in, let's say, 300 hours per month at 5-10 no limit hold'em, well, on average, if you're making $100 per hour, you'll make about $30,000 per month. Quite a good income if you put your butt in the chair and grind. I was always shocked to see some of my opponents who were also good, like good poker players who were doing the same thing as me, only play Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. On Friday, they would party. On Saturday, they would party. On Sunday, they would party. And on Monday, they would recover. And they were playing about 24 hours of poker per week, or about 100 per month. So I ended up playing 3 times as much poker than they did, and I therefore made 3 times as much money as they did. They also made the mistake of not playing when the games were the softest, which are usually nights and weekends, going back to table selection. If you can play in games where the players are abnormally bad, or against players who are abnormally bad because you know when they play, that's also going to jack your win rate up substantially. So you want to play as much volume as you reasonably can while still maintaining a good positive attitude and a high amount of focus. If you find that if you play more than 40 hours per week, you start to get angry, bored, mad, disgruntled, bitter, whatever, then you probably need to play a little bit less. That said, I personally enjoy making a lot of money, and that overrides whatever amount of boredness I have. If you sit me at the poker table and tell me I'm going to win a lot of money, I'm happy to do it. If you're playing online, you want to make a point to play as many tables as you reasonably can. Now, some people take this to the extreme and they try to play so many to the point that their win rate goes down, because as you add more tables, your win rate will inevitably decrease. So let's say you can normally play 2 tables at a time, and you want to learn to try to play more tables. You want to work on that muscle. What I would recommend you do is go down to the micro stakes, to where you're not even really playing for much money, or any money at all, and play 4 tables. And do that for like 4 hours. It will feel hectic. It will feel stressful, even though you're not really playing for money. Just play there, focus on making really good decisions and playing your absolute best. And you will be worn out after those 4 hours. But when you move back to your normal game, 2 tables is going to feel easy. And maybe you add a 3rd table. Also, you can move back down to the tiny stakes for about 4 hours and play 6 tables at a time. That's going to feel really hectic. But if you get to where you can play 6, okay, 4 is going to be a cakewalk. And you can continue this process until you can play more and more and more tables. Now, it's very important to do step number 1 first. You have to make sure you're playing in a game you can beat. Playing a ton of tables in a game you can't beat is a recipe for disaster. Playing a ton of games with no edge or a tiny edge is also not a great idea. You want to make sure you have a decently large edge before you do start to play a whole lot of tables. Because there will be some amount of tables where you see your win rate drop off. I personally can play about 16 tables at a time online with no trouble. It's relatively easy for me. But when I start playing more, like 20 or 24, I can't handle it. It's too quick for me. I'm a slow old man at this point. So I cap myself at 16 tables, and then when I expect the games to be a little bit tougher or the buy-ins are a little bit bigger than normal, I'll play fewer, like 8 or 12. So be logical, be reasonable, and make a point to put in as much volume as you reasonably can. Very importantly, don't be lazy. Poker is a great game because you have the potential to grind as much as you want and set your own schedule. Some people take that to mean, I don't have to play very much. And you don't have to, but if you don't, you certainly won't move up in stakes quickly. You are your own boss, but you have to be a disciplined boss who makes a point to put in good volume. Finally, hack number 3, you have to keep a proper bankroll. I have a large article over at pokercoaching.com on bankroll management. Check it out at pokercoaching.com/bankroll. That said, a way to move up in stakes quicker is to take shots when the games are especially soft. Say you normally play 1-2 no limit hold'em and you have, let's say, $10,000 to your name, which is, a nice bankroll for 1-2, but maybe not quite enough for 2-5. If you expect the game to be overly soft, perhaps on nights or weekends when, 2 or 3 players at the table are absolutely going off and playing very poorly, that's the time you want to move up and try to push it, because your edge will naturally be bigger against players who are playing poorly. So even though you only have, let's say, $2,500 buy-ins at 2-5, you should probably be willing to take a $1,500 shot or a $2,000 shot, for 100 big blind buy-ins in those games, because they are especially good. If you are normally bankrolled, let's say, $1,000 tournaments, and there is a quarterly $2,500 buy-in tournament at your local casino that you expect to be very soft because they satellite in a bunch of players who normally play $100 games, that's probably a pretty good spot to take a shot. That said, if you normally play $1,000 games, you don't want to go play a $10,000 tournament, especially one with a ton of players in it, because variance is going to be through the roof, and even if you have an edge, it's going to take forever to realize that edge, and losing $10,000 out of, let's say, a $100,000 bankroll actually is a pretty big dent. So take shots, but do it logically. That said, you need a much smaller bankroll than most normal bankroll recommendations when your win rate will be abnormally high. All this is thoroughly discussed at pokercoaching.com/bankroll. Make sure you check it out. So that's it. Moving up quickly is ideal because you have the potential to make a whole lot more money. And to win at poker, you have to find a game you can beat. You have to play it a lot, and you have to keep a proper bankroll. If you do these 3 things, you will thrive. And if you don't, you're just gambling.